How did Luke Skywalker get to the point of saying it's time for the Jedi to end? You may think you know the answer, but I'm here to offer another explanation. What if Ahsoka Tano is the reason Luke is set on seeing the end of the Jedi Order in Episode 8? I think Dave Filoni could be setting Ahsoka's story up in a way that not only fills in some major gaps of the sequel trilogy, but also makes her the Grand Master of the new Jedi Order. Let me explain. We've already discussed why Ahsoka does not consider herself a Jedi in a recent video. Make sure you check that video out. Ahsoka has a strong connection to the Force. As we know, the daughter, the living personification of the light side, is responsible for resurrecting Ahsoka back to life after being killed by the sun. She is in many ways the purest example of what a Jedi is and should be. But I, along with many other senators of the channel, don't believe Ahsoka will rejoin the Jedi Order. So how then will she become the Grand Master of the new Jedi Order rebuilt by Luke Skywalker? The rank of Grand Master, prior to the Galactic Empire, was reserved for the oldest and most wisest of the Jedi. The most notable Grand Master of the Jedi Order was Master Yoda. Our answer to why Ahsoka will become Grand Master partially lies in Legends material. It's my understanding that after Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker, now Grand Master of his own Jedi Order, made his fair share of changes to how the Order would operate. For example, Jedi were allowed to form attachments and have relationships. Luke himself married a woman named Mara Jade. In addition, Jedi training was not conducted through, for a lack of a better phrase, classroom lectures, as we see in the prequels. Instead, students were encouraged to learn through experience and by the way of the Force. As I studied the old Legends material, I kept drawing the connection between Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano. But, based on what we know about the Ahsoka show, it doesn't seem like Ahsoka's journey is leading her to become the Grand Master of Luke's Jedi Order. Let me explain why I believe she could become the Grand Master, despite the apparent plot of finding Ezra Bridger and Grand Admiral Thrawn in the Ahsoka show. As we've already discussed, the Grand Master is the oldest and wisest of the Jedi. Who would be the oldest and wisest Jedi at the time we see Ahsoka and Luke in the Book of Boba Fett? Ahsoka Tano. Now, before you disagree with me, let me point out a few things Dave Filoni has said regarding who Ahsoka is at this point in her life. In the gallery for The Mandalorian Season 2, Dave Filoni points out that Ahsoka is technically Luke's senior, and that she has had vast amount of training compared to Luke. Again, this is based on the timeline and where the characters are at in their life. Ahsoka has lots of knowledge at this point, and she is very distinct from the Jedi Order she left during the Clone Wars. Dave Filoni considers her a master at this point based on her knowledge and skills as a Force wielder. He makes the comparison to Gandalf. Sketches of this comparison have led fans to speculate on who the character of Ahsoka the White could be. Now, we've discussed why Ahsoka has the credentials to be the Grand Master, but let's speculate on how it could actually happen, and why it's so important to the character of Luke Skywalker. It's still unclear when Ahsoka and Luke meet for the first time. However, we may have already seen their last interaction. And yes, I'm talking about their brief screen time together in Episode 6 of the first season of the Book of Boba Fett. As a final goodbye, Luke asks Ahsoka if he will ever see her again. As Ahsoka turns to look back, she says, "Perhaps." My first impression of this scene is that Luke is disappointed. Now, we are left to speculate, but as Ahsoka is talking to Din Djarin, it's implied that she is aware of Luke's plans to establish a new Jedi Order. And she's okay with it. Luke Skywalker is at this point the last Jedi. Ahsoka likely still doesn't consider herself a Jedi at this point. However, Ahsoka, in my opinion, is the only master who could have truly re-established a Jedi Order destined not to fail. As we've discussed in a recent video, I believe Anakin was destined to bring balance to the Force, and I believe it's Ahsoka's destiny to keep the balance. She could have stayed to help Luke with his new Jedi Order. In fact, I think Luke wanted her help. We can speculate and assume that Luke and Ahsoka met prior to their screen time in the Book of Boba Fett. Ahsoka most likely had conversations with Luke about the old Jedi Order, his father, and, ultimately, how the Jedi failed his father, turning him into Darth Vader. But you're probably asking at this point how this ties into Episode 8, and why Luke wants the Jedi to end. Like I mentioned, I think Luke was disappointed to see Ahsoka leave in the Book of Boba Fett. I believe this is the last time they meet prior to Luke's death in The Last Jedi. We know Luke trains a new generation of Jedi, but, in the end, Snoke is able to turn his nephew Ben Solo to the dark side, leading to the destruction of Luke's Jedi Order. For one, Luke could resent Ahsoka for leaving him. If she hadn't left to find Ezra, she could have stayed to mentor Luke and the rest of his students, which could have prevented Ben from turning into Kylo Ren. Additionally, by the time Rey finds Luke on Act 2, I wonder if Luke presumes Ahsoka to be dead. He tells Rey that the ancient Jedi texts, like him, are the last of the Jedi religion. He either doesn't see Ahsoka as a Jedi, knows she is dead, or presumes she is dead. I think she is still alive. More on this in a minute. But this is how Dave Filoni can expound on the sequels. I know I said that the Book of Boba Fett was their last interaction, and yes, it may be, but that doesn't mean we can't explore previous conversations between the two Jedi Masters. There's so much to explore between those two characters. Conversations about the Jedi, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Leia. How cool would it be to see Anakin's Padawan and daughter on screen in live action together? But how does this all tie into the sequel trilogy? And would it carry over into post-Rise of Skywalker content? The answer is yes. Now, none of this is confirmed. This is only speculation, but it could go like this. When Ahsoka leaves Luke in the Book of Boba Fett, she goes to meet with Sabine, and they take off into the New Beyond to find Ezra Bridger. They find Ezra, and throughout the Ahsoka show we see Sabine, Ezra, and Ahsoka be hunted down by a dark side assassin. In the season finale, Ahsoka and Ezra somehow find themselves in the world between worlds. They know about this mysterious place, as they both have been there before, except this time, they're trapped. Trapped in a place where time is not the same as it is in the galaxy we know. Days, months, years go by, but it only feels like hours to them. The First Order rises and falls with the death of Palpatine on Exegol. Finally, Ahsoka and Ezra find their way out of the world between worlds to find a new generation of Jedi, perhaps led by Rey or Finn. Ahsoka learns of Luke's fate and partially blames herself for leaving Luke, just as she had left his father. In an attempt to make things right this time, she becomes the Grand Master of the new Jedi Order. She trains the Jedi to serve the will of the Force. She tells them they can form attachments, but reminds them not to give in to their fears. She teaches them to trust the Force. But, as we know, there cannot be light without the dark. A nefarious dark side Force user will ultimately rise to challenge Ahsoka. But Ahsoka, now at the culmination of her life, the height of her power, will rise to the occasion and make sure to keep the Force in balance, preserving the legacy of her very own master. To circle back, Ahsoka should have been the Grand Master of Luke's Jedi Order, and she for sure should be the Grand Master for the post-Rise of Skywalker Jedi Order. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my recent video where I discuss why Ahsoka does not consider herself to be a Jedi.